This is Lesson 3, Prepping Projects in Prelude. Adobe Prelude is an ingesting program. It's intended to allow you to take your footage from your tapeless media and bring it onto your computer. If it's already on your computer, maybe you've already captured it, it's intended to allow you to organize and prepare the files that you can then send to Adobe Premiere Pro. Another feature of the application is the ability to transcode or convert video from one format to another as a batch in a very rapid process. Premiere Pro will import and edit a wide range of video formats. So in most situations, you can just open Premiere Pro, the media will come right in, no problem at all. But there are a few formats that it can't work with. In situations like this, you may need to first transcode the files into a compatible format in Prelude, and then you can work with them. You can also use Prelude's transcoding options if you need to convert multiple media formats into a single media format. It can often be more convenient to simply use Prelude's batch processing ability to do that than it would be to import the individual clips into Premiere Pro and then export them one at a time. So the first thing in Prelude, I'm going to make a new project. I'm going to expand the new project window so that I can see everything. I'm going to name this new project 0301 to note our lesson number. And I'd like to save it on my desktop. First thing I need to do is ingest media. And I know that's a pretty funny term. Ingest is the term used to describe bringing media from a tape-based device or capturing it and bringing it onto your hard drive. So it's bringing your media into the application or onto your computer. I can either click the Ingest button, or I can double-click inside of the project panel, and they'll both launch Ingest. The Ingest dialog box allows me to find clips on my hard drive, and I have the clips on my hard drive right now. They're on my desktop, so I'll navigate to my desktop. I'm in the PR Lessons folder, and I'm looking for the media library. I'm just double-clicking on each folder as I find it. And the media library, I'd like to go to the Werewolves in Central Park folder, and I'd like to go to my A-roll folder. So I'm going to click on that file. Now, if I wanted to, I have several options here in the Ingest dialog box that can be very helpful. Now, these clips are already on my hard drive, so I'm not going to need to transfer clips to destination. That's how you would take clips from your card or your camera's hard drive and put them on your computer. If you enable it, you then have the ability to browse for a location to store your files, and you can even add a subfolder in that location for the files you're bringing in now. By default, that'll be based on the date, but you could change that to any name you like. This is also where you can choose to transcode files, to change files from whatever format they were recorded in into a new format that may suit your needs better. If you look in the Premiere Pro help files, you'll find that Premiere Pro can import and export a wide range of file formats. But there are a few, especially some of the newer ones, that it can't handle. In situations like this, the ability to batch transcode your files in Prelude can be extremely helpful. But that's not really required in this situation. These are standard MPEG clips, they're H.264. They will work fine in Premiere Pro. So I'm just going to turn off the transfer clips option. It's not required here because these clips are already on my hard drive. You also have the ability to add file metadata. Metadata is extra data about files that can be added mostly for logging and search purposes. Adobe really likes metadata. You have the ability to add it in programs like Bridge, and just about every Adobe program that exists has the ability to edit or work with metadata in one form or another. The camera itself adds metadata, but you can add additional metadata, perhaps about where the shot was taken or other information that may be useful in your workflow. A lot of times it's used for searching and archival purposes. You also have the ability to rename the files all at once. File rename changes the default camera name, which is often a very unusual name, into something more appropriate for you. Now in this case, it's not really necessary, since these clips have already been named, they've already been saved, And we're really just ingesting them so that we can work with them in Prelude and then transfer them to Premiere Pro. Now, once the files are in your project panel, I want to go grab a few more files. So I'll click Ingest again. It'll put me in the same folder that I was in. I want to jump out using the folder on the left to the B-roll folder. One of the things that you can do here is you can scrub preview video clips. So if you aren't sure what clips you have, you can always just click and drag your mouse across them and preview them very quickly. Now I'd like to bring in all of these clips, so I'm just going to click on the Check All button. Again, I'm not going to transfer them. They're already on my computer. I'm not going to rename them. They already have good, helpful names. So I'll click Ingest again, like so. What I'd like to add in my project panel are folders to make it a little easier to identify my content. It's a very old technique to name your video footage A-roll and B-roll. A-roll would be your primary footage. So I'll take the reporter interview and put it in my A-roll bin. I'm going to make a new bin, which I'll call B-roll. And I'm going to take all the other footage, the B-roll, the secondary footage, and I held down Shift to select all of my clips, and I'll drag that into my B-roll folder. So it's very helpful to organize your clips so that you can work with them in an easy fashion. The default display in the project panel is an icon view. You can change it to a list view if you want to see more information about your clips. You can move the list view around. You can also extend any of the columns if you need to see them better. So if I click the A-roll folder open by clicking on the little reveal triangle, I can see the reporter at crime scene clip, and I can see that it's a clip. I can see when it was ingested, and I can see information about the media start and media end of this file, where it's actually from. Clicking the tilde key on the keyboard, that's the squiggly little line above tab, expands the currently highlighted panel to full screen. So I can make it easier to see any of this information, frame rate, file path. All of this is helpful when you need to find or get a little more information about your files. I'm going to extend the B-roll too so you can see the same thing. To return my interface to its default configuration, I simply press the tilde key again. So tilde is a min-max toggle. It takes whatever panel you have active, like the monitor panel, for example, expands it to full screen, and then when you click it again, pulls it right back down to its original size. If you double-click on a clip, it will open in the monitor. The monitor allows you to preview your clips. You can play them.
This has been discovered. The victim's name has not been released,
and it's basically used for previewing your files. You can also use Prelude to assemble a very quick rough cut. This rough cut, which you can use to very quickly assemble footage, can then be taken into Premiere Pro and work with there. Here's what I want to do. The bystander interview 1 is...
How about you? Are you surprised?
Call the National Guard!
The bystander interview has areas that I would like to use and areas that I would like to ignore. What I'd like to do is take this and make it into a sub-clip. This basically takes a clip and produces a secondary clip from it based on the original. But the secondary clip can be a subsection of it, hence the name subclip. Now, parts of this interview I don't need. All the parts where she's preparing and walking up to the person she's interviewing aren't necessary. So everything before 5 seconds, and I'm just going to type 500 in the playhead position field, I don't really need. She walk up, she's preparing, and I'm actually being very, very generous with the amount of extra footage I'm taking. In reality, I'll probably want to trim off more from the beginning of this. I'll probably want to start where he's actually ranting because it's more visually appealing. But I want to be very, very generous with the extra space or handles that I add. I'm going to add marker, add subclip marker. And notice on the timeline panel, we now have a blue marker that pops up. It starts where my playhead was, and it actually extends to the end of the clip. I'm going to slide to where I want the subclip to end.
Understand, this is not some sort of freak accident. This is not what you see on the news.
So you think this...
I think that 17 seconds would be a good place to stop this. And again, I'm being very generous with where I place this marker. Now that I've got my playhead into where I'd like to have the end of the subclip, in the marker inspector, I'm just going to click out. That's going to move the out point of the subclip to the position of the playhead. Everything follows the playhead. So now what we have here is a subsection of this clip, and I'd like to change the name. I'd change it to Bystander Interview 1 hyphen good part. Notice that nothing has changed in the project panel. The subclip won't be visible until you press save. I used Command S because I'm on a Mac. On Windows, that'd be Control S. And now notice a new entry has appeared in the B-roll folder. The icons are different. It's a clip icon, but it's also a clip icon that has a smaller little braces around the edge. That indicates that it is a subclip. Now, what I'd like to add is to add a rough cut, a really rough assemblage of clips, so that when I start in Premiere Pro, I can actually take this rough cut, export it to Premiere Pro, so I'll already have something in my project to start with. I can then use Premiere Pro's tools that are designed to very quickly refine an edit to take that rough cut into a finished cut. So I don't have to start from scratch in Premiere Pro. If I prep files in Prelude, I can have a much quicker editing job in Premiere Pro. File, create rough cut. I've got to name this. I'm going to call this Reporter Rough Cut. I'm also going to save it on my desktop, right next to my Prelude project. And if I double-click on Reporter Rough Cut, it gives me a new timeline. I'd like to add my Reporter at Crime Scene clip. I'm just going to drag that onto my timeline, like so, and it fills the timeline. I can use the scroll bar at the bottom to zoom in or out on the timeline. I'd also like to add my bystander interview to the rough cut. It's going to snap to the end, like so. So now we have a very quick assemblage of two clips, and I'd like to take this all into Premiere Pro. So I'm going to save my project again, Command S or Control S. I'm going to highlight everything in the project panel. I click on the first one, hold down Shift, click on the last entry, and then File. I have a couple different choices. Okay. One, I can export the project, which will allow me to create a Premiere Pro project, or I can directly send it to Premiere Pro. Since I'm not ready to work in Premiere Pro right now, I want to choose Export Project. It allows me to choose a destination for the project. I'll choose local disk. I'm not going to upload this to a server. I want to export the project, not the media. I don't need to make a backup of the media. I'm going to name this one Reporter at Crime Scene. And I could choose the type of project. I have two choices here. I'm going to use Premiere Pro, obviously, because that's what we're working with. But you could also use Prelude to prep files and then send them to Final Cut Pro by making a Final Cut Pro XML file. But in this case, Premiere Pro is our choice. I can choose to use a subfolder to create a subfolder for this content. I'm going to name it Reporter. And then I'll click OK. I get to choose where to save this content. Again, I'm going to save it right on my desktop. I'll click Choose. Now I can hide Prelude. I pressed Command H because I'm on a Mac. You could also just click the little minus sign on Windows to hide it. And I now have a Reporter subfolder on my desktop. Inside of that, I have a Premiere Pro project, Reporter at Crime Scene. That Premiere Pro project contains the information that was in my Prelude project file. In the next lesson, we're going to open that project in Premiere Pro, and you can see how Prelude and Premiere Pro integrate with each other. So in this lesson, you've learned how to create a new Prelude project. You've learned how to ingest media, whether you're pulling that from a media card or whether you're pulling that from your own hard drive and just need to quickly work with it in Prelude. You've learned how to make a subclip, which basically subdivides a video clip in Prelude. And you've learned how to quickly assemble a rough cut and then export everything to Premiere Pro as a Premiere Pro project.